I once saw a stand-up comedian perform live who opened his act with the declaration that it's always easier to laugh when it's someone else's religion being made fun of. And the sequence of jokes he told thereafter were a total flop. He completely failed to prove his point, and I ended up sitting there in the audience reflecting that really public sensitivities about mockery of religion are quite different from what this stand-up comedian proposed. But, of course, there's another sense in which we all understand his point. It's easy to perceive something as absurd when you don't believe in it yourself, and the people who do believe in it, the people who are committed to it, the absurdities to them are invisible. What to us seems self-evidently unreasonable, to them passes by unquestioned. And in this sense, nudism is, believe it or not, for a significant minority of people here on the internet, their religion.
And people look regardless if we have clothes on or clothes off.
Yeah, true.
Everybody checks out everybody.
I don't think there's anything wrong with having a look, but so long as you're not doing it with like an agenda, like as long as you're not doing it in a creepy way, but like...
Is this cute right now? Should I just take this off?
I really do understand that even if they joke around about it, a lot of the people on the other side of this debate take this tremendously seriously. I grew up with a whole lot of tremendously serious nudists in my own family, so I've heard it all before. What you will encounter again and again if you try to talk about nudism with nudists face to face is the insistence that any objection you have to nudism must be based on a misunderstanding of the meaning of the term. So, the discussion of these topics very rarely goes beyond clarifying the meaning of the term, and many nudists live with the delusion that if only people really understood what nudism means, they couldn't possibly disagree with it. The only other philosophy I've encountered that's like this are the people who believe in determinism. Because it's not just that they believe in it, they believe that if other people understood the meaning of the word determinism, they couldn't possibly disagree with it. This is a further step into self-deception, self-delusion. It's very hard to get across to nudists, no, I understand your definition of the term. You don't need to clarify anymore. I understand what you really mean. I just actually genuinely disagree with you. So what they'll say again and again is, nudism is not exhibitionism. Nudism is not about sexuality at all. It's about nature. It's about freedom. Like, in every other political context, we would then challenge an appeal to nature fallacy, right? But never with nudism. Just, nature is this self-evident, transcendental criterion that justifies why climbing a tree when naked is tremendously meaningful and rewarding, and climbing a tree wearing clothes, you're somehow cut off from nature, whatever. There's just meaning of nature, not questioned. Meaning of freedom, in no way pinned down or specified. Of course, what they'll rush to explain to you is that nudism is not about showing off, that it's not about ego, that it's not about actually being beautiful, that if you're ugly or fat, you can still be a nudist. I've been to my share of nudist colonies. I've been to my share of nude beaches. I assure you that part is true. You will meet and encounter many, many people who are very overweight, enjoying the privileges of nudism. But again, part of the problem is that when you engage in discussion with nudists, this tends to go into a downward spiral of self-justification with this unending pretense that anyone who disagrees with nudism is merely failing to understand the full range of meaning of the term. They don't understand the implicit meaning of the term. They don't understand the profound meaning of the term, or they're ascribing to nudism exhibitionist or sexual overtones, undertones, implications that just couldn't possibly be there. This should instead be a discussion about nature and freedom. I am just barely old enough to remember crossing swords with people who humorlessly advanced the hypothesis that everyone on earth is gay. That the people who think of themselves as heterosexual are repressed homosexuals. I think this philosophy has dwindled away to its last few followers. Probably you can still find them somewhere on Reddit somewhere. But let me tell you, there were people on this world, just a few decades ago, there were a whole lot of them, who got into this mindset of justifying their own feelings and their own identity by insisting that everyone else felt that way too. And a couple of them, it's just not the topic of this video, so I'm not going to get into it, but a couple of them became notorious cult leaders. And then part of their cult was reaching out to people and explaining, oh, no, you think you feel this way, but you've been brainwashed into thinking you're straight, and really you're a repressed homosexual. I met people with PhDs who still clung to the hypothesis that was much more popular in, say, the 1970s, that everyone was bisexual, right? And there's a similar psychological pattern of self-justification there. Like everyone's bisexual, they just don't know it yet. And it ultimately comes down to the absurdity of saying, you don't know how you feel. I know how you really feel. And not because I know you, but because I know a universal principle that I'm claiming to be true in all instances for everyone, right? Like the conclusions of my philosophy are universal and apply to everyone, including you, so your feelings don't matter as much as my theory. This line of reasoning to rationalize and advance nudism really implicitly relies on the assertion that everyone's asexual. These people don't find it erotic, arousing, or stimulating to see a member of the opposite sex naked, to see a member of the same sex naked, that there's absolutely nothing sexual in it for them to exhibit themselves in the nude or to see others exhibit themselves. This just isn't stimulating to them at all. Now, I am not in a position to question their assertion if that is really how they feel. I notice in examining this other YouTube channel, Slightly Crazy Vegan, there's some counter evidence, right? There are actually many videos of her giggling on camera and getting excited looking at nude images on the internet. She's filming herself having reactions to things this way, right? She has a separate video which asks the question, is it okay to send dick pics to nudists? You can't really claim there's nothing erotic, nothing arousing about exhibiting oneself in the nude and then turn around and say, stop sending me dick pics on Instagram, that's gross. Which one is it going to be? To be clear, I am not making the claim that nobody can go to a beach and be surrounded by attractive members of the opposite sex who are naked or attractive members of the same sex and be naked and feel nothing, not react in any way, regardless as a completely non-sexual, non-stimulating situation. There are some people among us, whether they identify as asexual or not, or if they just have an incredibly low sex drive, they have zinc deficiency, whatever their situation is. There are some people who feel that way. Could we also admit that there are some people who are pretending to feel that way precisely because they do enjoy going to a nude beach, they do enjoy playing frisbee, playing volleyball, playing tennis in the nude. They precisely enjoy those things a little bit more because they're looking at naked people doing those activities, or they're aware that those naked people are looking at them naked while doing this. Can we admit that it's possible that more than 0% of humanity are motivated to engage in these activities for precisely that reason, and they're motivated to advance this ludicrous philosophy for that reason?
Depends whether that checking out then leads on to unwanted behaviour. That could be an issue.
Oh yeah, I've told a few blokes would be too over creepy in the bushes, you know, like, so piss off. Like, go and have a good look at yourself in the mirror, you know, and get some self-respect.
Or sometimes I just like make a sandball and just throw it next to them. So I just make like a pyramid and just like, yep, okay, ammo, throw there, throw there, throw there.
Look, I say checking out each other's equipment is perfectly natural.
Hey, I'm a butt girl. I look at butts. I can't help myself.
If you had a chicky babe like I had last week in my place, yeah, of course we look at it.
You know, if someone's walking past me, yeah, I have a look.
Because she had headlights like a Ferrari, you know, and an ass like a model.
I think I've already adumbrated this point clearly enough, but to spell it out explicitly, if you're willing to take other people's subjective experiences and feelings seriously, right, as evidence in constructing your philosophy, in constructing your worldview, in advancing your political program, that doesn't mean that you can discard everyone else's subjective feelings when it's convenient for your political agenda, right? Like, some people are gay and they therefore respond to certain kinds of stimulus in certain kinds of ways. And some people are bisexual and some people are asexual. But to claim that your feelings are universal, that there is nothing sexually provocative about nudity, and that there's no exhibitionistic element whatsoever in presenting yourself in the nude, is flatly absurd. And it can only be sustained, it can only be supported by dogmatically insisting that other people don't feel the way that they earnestly tell you they do feel. I live in Canada. Once in a while, I visit my extended family in the south of France. Right? Nudity, it's publicly tolerated. It's kind of sort of legal in both places. And I have the experience in Canada and the south of France where my mind is on other things. When I'm in France, I'm taking care of my daughter and I'm setting up a picnic for my daughter and my girlfriend on the beach or something. I'm not thinking sexy thoughts at all. I'm stressed out, I'm busy, or I'm trying to be entertaining for my kid. I don't want to look at beautiful naked women. I don't want to think about that, but there they are. And let me tell you something. As a heterosexual man who is in absolutely no way asexual, who is not suffering from zinc deficiency, and who does not have a low sex drive, yes, it can be an unwanted and jarring interruption in your day to suddenly be confronted with the sight of a beautiful naked woman. And I'm not saying it's pleasant or unpleasant. You know what? I guess I am. I'm saying it's unpleasant. Okay? Can we go with that? If your political philosophy as a nudist requires you to now revile and insult me for my honesty, I think that's just as ridiculous as if I, as a heterosexual male, were going to revile and insult a gay male and say, how dare you feel turned on by going into the showers with all the other guys on the sports team? You should just be cool like I am because I can shower with a bunch of naked guys and feel nothing. Trust me, nothing. But here you are getting turned on. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to revile him for feeling the way he feels, or like make some universal philosophical claim. You can't possibly feel the way you feel because nudity isn't sexual. Really? Really? How deep do you want to take this discussion? How deep can this discussion possibly go? What we're discussing is the reality of human instinct, all right? And that's something that tends to remain just outside the remit of all our political philosophies. It's precisely the mess of instincts we still carry with us in the modern world, left over from a very different world we once inhabited. If it could be established that nudism is natural, we'd only have to return to the familiar trope of explaining that what is natural is not necessary and not necessarily beneficial. When nudists are confronted with the absurdity of their reliance on an appeal to nature fallacy, they will very often respond by trying to exaggerate to you just how functional nudism is, how it's somehow so much better climbing a tree in the nude than wearing clothes. This actually reminds me of the debates I have with meat eaters when they insist that there's just no material on this earth that's as effective to make clothing out of as wool or leather. What I actually say in response is, if those materials really were the most effective, don't you think the U.S. military would be using them? Why is it that the U.S. military doesn't make uniforms out of wool? Why is it they're not using leather boots anymore after they did for decades and decades, right? It's because they discovered that actually leather is not a very effective material to use. It's because wool, it's ineffective in use, and when you wash it and dry it, there are all these problems. There are actually really fundamentally functional reasons why almost all U.S. military equipment, maybe the exception is dress uniforms, like what they wear to funerals and state functions, but basically everything they use on the battlefield when it really matters happens to be made out of vegan materials. There is no special advantage to wool or leather. Is it so hard to recognize that there's no special advantage to nudity? If you really think that the U.S. Marine Corps could get through their obstacle course 30 seconds faster by doing it naked rather than wearing a uniform, you don't think they'd be doing it? I mean, when the stakes are that high, when you're willing to kill people, you're willing to kill sheep to make wool. When you're willing to kill people, you're willing to kill cows to make leather boots. If there were any advantage in it, there isn't. That's why the U.S. military doesn't use those things. I have the experience of climbing a tree naked. I have the experience climbing a tree wearing clothes. Let me tell you something. Clothes are better. And finally, let me just say, I've never known a nudist who is willing to reflect on or discuss what it is they mean by freedom in any depth or at any length. What is this freedom that requires you to be naked? This freedom that you are deprived of by wearing clothes when, for example, climbing a tree. My girlfriend grew up in Detroit. I grew up in Toronto. Where we come from, freedom comes down to two little words. Car ownership, right? All our lives, we were sold this image that what freedom means is owning a car, right? And we've had to grow out of that. We've had to recognize, no, car ownership isn't freedom. At best, it's something just wildly unrelated to freedom. Your social status also is linked to owning a car. Now, I do think one element of the philosophy of nudism is that concealment itself is somehow evil. That by deceiving others or deceiving yourself as to how you really appear, who you really are, you're engaged in something perverse and self-destructive. Therefore, wearing clothes, or let's say never looking at yourself naked in the mirror, is part of the psychopathology of modernity and some that didn't exist perhaps in some idealized ancient society where clothes were at least scarce. In this same sense, though, let's question again what's meant by freedom. Does freedom mean that you need to know what car I drive? Does freedom mean that I own a car and take a picture of myself with my car and post it on Instagram to exhibit the type of car I own and drive? Is there something really so wrong with concealing the car I own, with just saying, no, that's private, that's not something I'm going to show you, that's not something I'm going to exhibit, that's not something you need to see, it's not something you need to know about to know what really matters about me? What I've got under these clothes might in this same way be at least as irrelevant as whatever it is I'm hiding in my garage. Concealment is only evil if you're doing it in order to manipulate someone into doing something they don't want to do. I suppose I could agree that if you lived in a society where people remained virgins until marriage and a man had to commit to and marry a woman without ever seeing her naked, something, by the way, written about at length in Thomas More's Utopia, it actually was a problem in his era of, Protestant England. In some contexts like that, you could mislead someone into thinking you're thin when you're fat, or fat when you're thin, or thinking you have huge breasts when you've really taken cabbages and stuffed them into the top part of your dress. Sure, there could be a sense in which concealment of your car, or specifically concealment of your body, is used to manipulate someone into doing something they otherwise wouldn't do, into manipulating real world outcomes. But the problem there is not the concealment, it's the manipulation. The problem is not the choice to refuse to exhibit your naked body.
Dun, 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 dun.